Quick Slants is presented by your local New England Honda dealers.
Happy holidays, everybody, huh? What do you do with a win like the one we saw Sunday? I'm asking you that. What's it a race, for instance? You look at the end result and say, hold everything. Does Chad Ryland's 56-yarder offset him kicking it to Pueblo and having a miserable rookie year in general? Devontae Parker, he caught 4 balls. Does that mean hit the pause button on finding a real number one? Undermanned, on the road, nothing to play for. A win like Sunday's doesn't mean nothing. But what does it mean in the grand scheme when it takes until Christmas Eve to get your 4th win of the year? That bears watching. So does this show. It's Quick Slants. Welcome in. Here's the game plan for the program. The waiting game is ongoing between Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick. What's next for our boy Bailey? Ranking the roster, and then your comments. We have a real fun one today. And speaking of fun, there's no guy to bring the fun quite like Michael Hurley from CBS Boston. Hi, Hurls.
Hi, every room I walk into, that's how I'm introduced. So thank you for keeping that up.
You're welcome.
As for your question, Tom, I think you know, grand scheme, no. We're not changing grand schemes based on that. But I think you've got to get through the day. You've got to get through the week. You've got to get through the season. And so these types of victories make it so much easier for those guys who have poured every ounce of their lives into this season, even if the results don't show it. So good for them. That's what I say, Tom.
You're exactly right. And, you know, this conversation that we'll get into later in the show about tanking, that is the strawmanniest of strawman arguments that I've ever heard. No one ever contended that the Patriots or Bill Belichick were going to try to lose football games. So all the people saying, ha, you think this is a tanking team? No one thought that was going to happen. Meanwhile, it's time for Quick Fire. It's presented by your local New England Honda dealers. Looming on the horizon is a decision on Bill Belichick's future. All right, nobody ruling out the possibility, and NFL media has reported there's no firm decision that's been made, which leads one to believe, what kind of decision is it if it's not firm? Michael, shouldn't the Patriots be meeting with Bill Belichick now if they want to see his vision for the future as opposed to January 8th? I think this kind of just buttresses the notion that the horse might be out of the barn.
On the surface, no, because there's work to be done each week. There's games to prepare for. But when you talk about your grand scheme, the larger picture, the season's not going anywhere. As soon as they were eliminated from the playoffs, that should have begun, I would think, but they're pushing it off. I think that's clear. It's clear as though there's going to be some hesitation, some discomfort. But to your point, if there is going to be listening about what that future might entail, you'd want it before the end of the season. Yeah,
and if you want to have a decision and a give and take, then you would certainly sit down and have a conversation about it, unless, of course, you're already on the road to a decision. Meanwhile, speaking of decisions, there is one that will need to be made with young Mac Jones at the end of the season. You bringing this guy back? Here's Bill O'Brien today speaking about Mac Jones' future.
I feel good about, Mac Jones. I really do. I think Mac Jones is a smart guy. He's a very hard worker. He's really done a good job in this situation here of being a good teammate. Look, these are things that happen in the course of a lot of careers, right? You have some ups and downs, and he's approached it the right way. He's working hard, and I believe in Mac. So I think Mac's going to be just fine.
It's really interesting, isn't it, Mike? It sounds as if wherever Mac Jones needs a recommendation, he might not get it from the highest reaches of the Patriots coaching staff, but there's plenty who would go to bat for him.
Yeah, and I think his teammates, or his offensive teammates, I should say, have been in that camp as well. As far as this comment goes, I mean, what was the alternative? There wasn't really much there to say. He wasn't going to sit there and say, man, that guy is a pain in the neck. I'm sick of him. So I don't put too much stock into it, but it is, there are a lot of people that would go to bat for him to steal your term.
But there was an earnestness. I felt there was an earnestness for the commentary. I mean, you don't want to give it that? All right,
no,
fine.
That's fair. I'll give you that.
Fine, okay. Mike Florio, of course, from Pro Football Talk. He put out his power rankings. Take a look at the top 7 here. AFC, AFC, NFC, AFC. Dominating the top is the AFC East, the American Football Conference Eastern Division. Mike, what do you make of that?
I mean, we knew that the Bills were probably going to, well, we thought the Bills would be better than the Bills are. The Dolphins have kind of replaced them, but it's top heavy because I still think the bottom of the AFC East is still roughly could be considered wet garbage if you want to put it in such terms. But no, I think it's wide open. I think that's the biggest shame of this year when it comes, if you're looking from a Patriots perspective, you only have to be kind of good to have a chance to get through this AFC playoffs. You don't have to be all-time great. You don't have to be prolific because as good as Baltimore looked last night, they've come up and down. As good as Miami can look, they can be beaten. So that is the one, ultimate piece of regret the Patriots could have building for this team is, man, you only had to be decent to really be a contender.
And the funny thing is in those early games, both against Philadelphia and Miami, they were decent. They were a decent football team early on before they absolutely fell off the precipice. Meanwhile, there's an MVP race going on. And here's some of the odds. Lamar Jackson with a scintillating performance against the Niners on Monday night leaps to the front, better than even odds. Then you have McCaffrey, Tua, Brock Purdy. On down the line, has Lamar Jackson sewn up the MVP race? Did everything come down to that Monday night game against the Niners?
I mean, probably just because we're so obsessed with giving it to a quarterback. I still think it's Christian McCaffrey. I know I'm going to get rocks thrown at me because it's a running back, but he is the offense, and it's tough on a night after last night to make this case. But when you lead the league in rushing, when you still have 600 receiving yards, when you lead the league in scrimmage touchdowns, he's so important to what they do. It's telling that he even scored last night. But we are a quarterback-obsessed nation. I've said it many times, so it probably will be Lamar.
You know, I had Nick Goss out in the newsroom asked me one day, he said, how come quarterbacks? And I happen to have one of the 50 votes among the voters for the year-end awards. And I said, look, they handle the ball on every single play. They are defenseless as they process downfield what they're going to do with it. There's more pressure on the quarterback as a hood ornament, as a standard bearer for the franchise, as the person who has to make decisions with the entire fate of the organization in their hands on every play. That's why I always defer to quarterback. But Christian McCaffrey did indeed make a good case this year. But 9 times out of 10, I'm going quarterback because of the pressure on that position. How do you like that?
That's fair. What if Lamar goes out and throws 4 picks next week? Then what are you going to do, Mr. Voter Man?
I'm going to say it's too much on him. It's too much on his plate. I'm going to go to the next quarterback down. All right, time now from the stands, presented by Shaw's, perfecting the art of fresh. Here was the question. How should the Patriots be viewing young Bailey Zappe entering 2024? You can read the numbers, but what's germane here is the fact that 77% of the voters said he's either, hey, he's a solid number 2 now, or he's competing for the number 2 as far as they're concerned when it comes into next year. Thank God only 3% said, just make him the starter. Big old Reef Money said the guy is poised in the pocket and making all the reads and getting the ball down the field. I don't understand why there is hate. I don't know if it's hate. Draft Fashanu from Penn State, that's a tackle, and a quarterback in the second, and grab a top free agent wideout, and it is so simple. So simple. Hey, Aldo, this entirely depends on draft position and who we draft. If we get this wee stuff, huge upside quarterback, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, assuming Caleb's off the table, then Zappy's a solid number 2. If no one's at that level or a veteran free agent, let him compete with whoever it is. So that means you could have a Zappe under center. I like this one from my guy, P. Nasser. Assuming the Patriots are picking out of the top 5, Jets will make sure of that. Zappe will be the starter. Since Belichick and the team finished strongly, Belichick will be the GM and head coach next year, leading to him trading down 4 times in the first round to accumulate 34 4th to 7th round picks over the next 3 drafts. You got you. Kevin Kaysen, irrational exuberance just like last year. Hurls.
Yeah.
What does Bailey Zappe do for you?
Well, I'll say this. Let's start with a positive because I, like you, watched him in the summer and the spring and thought he might not be in the league anymore. He had doubts himself, as we learned. He texted Kurt one of those questions. So credit to him for coming in, getting this opportunity. Finally, he had a couple opportunities throughout the year, and we all continued saying this kid probably doesn't belong in the league. He goes out and wins that game. He plays pretty well for a couple weeks out of his 4 starts. Credit to him. He's established that he will be in the league next year. I don't think he's someone you want to build your franchise around. I'm not sure that he's a starter, but as a spot starter, backup guy, I think he's proving himself, proving doubters, such haters like Tom Curran and myself wrong.
Who will have a better NFL career, Mac Jones or Bailey Zappe? Answer it.
Based on the way this year's gone, it's no question.
That's not what I asked. Who will have a better career?
I'd like to think and Mac Jones will get his head screwed on straight somewhere and figure it out. But I'm not a bet. I wouldn't put my money on it. No, he's got a higher top end, but what good has that done him this year?
Too much hemming and hawing. Growth potential. Brought to you by Dr. Lepresti. Feel younger, look younger, get your hair back. Call 1-800-GET-HAIR. Meanwhile, let's chew on this for just a second here. Best passer rating since the beginning of last year. The top two are both from Mac Jones. One recently, 126.7 against the Bills. The signature moment of Mac Jones' Patriots career. Then the Vikings lost on Thanksgiving last year. After that, and those are good teams. After that, you have Browns, Broncos, Steelers, Lions, who the Patriots beat 29-0 last year. All Bailey Zappe wins. And then again, you have good teams in the Eagles, Dolphins, and Dolphins, where Mac was pretty good. If you go all the way back to 2021, Mac Jones had some really good statistical games. So what do we make of all this? The competition, the performances, brings us down to my slant. Watch out! And it brings me to the question of what does Bailey Zappe think he's doing? Who is he fighting and in what war? I have belittled and eye-rolled about, well, since August, when he stunk. And he doesn't stink anymore. And I have been served a steaming cup of STFU. Yeah, I'm sure he couldn't care less about the case he makes to me, but what about the case he's made to the Patriots and to the rest of the league? What's he trying to prove? That he's a starting caliber player? That he can follow a Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins track to becoming the guy and a Pro Bowl level player in the right situation? Or is he making the case that he's a solid number two who you'd feel comfortable handing the reins to if a more physically gifted and highly drafted quarterback comes onto the roster? And he's either hurt or he needs some seasoning. Is he a Gardner Minshew level guy? He'd likely say, you know, my role's going to sort itself out. I'm just going to keep producing, and it will. But will he be satisfied, Bailey Zappe, I ask? If and when the Patriots make the inevitable decision to add a projected new starter in the offseason, either through draft or free agency, how does Zappe view himself? Is he looking at the Patriots quarterback landscape and saying, bring me another first rounder, I'll beat him out too? It's so fascinating to watch the way this unfolds, Michael. And I wonder, because we have so many cautionary tales around the NFL, Mike, with Tommy DeVito or Josh Dobbs or Sam Howell. So many guys who spark, have good games, and then flame out. It's hard to really put your chips on a guy and say, yeah, even though we didn't scout him as being this good, he is this good.
Yeah, and I think also something that Bailey Zappe has working for him is that he has, I'm the backup and I'm in. I'm going to sling it. I'm going to take these risks. I think of that touchdown in Pittsburgh to Hunter Henry where he barely fit it past the safety who took a bad read on it, where if a safety makes a better play on that, we're talking about another interception, another turnover. And credit to him, he's taking the shots. We saw him take a nice cover two hole shot Sunday night in Denver. I love me a cover two hole shot. That gets me excited. It's a pass that an NFL quarterback has to make, and one that I was not sure Bailey Zappe could make until Sunday night. So there's a lot of that, a lot of case being made where, all right, well, he's not good in practice. He might not understand certain things, but when the lights flick on, he can play. And the biggest thing, Tom, is this defense has been playing its butt off, as we know, turning the ball over and just watching Mac Jones play so poorly. So to have a guy just come in and be decent, I think it's been huge for everyone in that locker room.
Yeah, what's interesting about Bailey Zappe as compared to Mac Jones is downfield throws. There were so many occasions where Mac Jones had difficulty even keeping the ball on the grid. And Bailey Zappe's downfield throws, whether it be the Hunter Henry touchdown you mentioned against Pittsburgh, the touchdown to Zappe, which was an outstanding throw that he had to scramble on, but especially the throws to Devontae Parker, those receptions and completions are on the quarterback. We see all over the NFL. Guys make ridiculous catches with those stupid sticky gloves that the quarterback doesn't even have to throw a good ball on. Or the receiver's gotten so much separation, it's an easy pitch and catch. But with Zappe's throws, he's throwing into small windows, and his receivers, except for Demario Douglas the other night when he had a backpedaling catch, those throws are on Zappe, not on the receiver making ridiculous catches. Credit to them, but the ball's where it needs to be, and that's a contrast with what Mac Jones has done. So we're gonna tap the brakes. We're gonna think about Heineke. We're gonna think about Howell. We're gonna think about Minshew. We're gonna think about DeVito. We're also gonna think about your Kirk Cousinses and your Brock Purdy's and your guys who did, Dak Prescott, become players who were able to ascend and overcome their draft status and turn into good players. Meanwhile, Gerard Mayo today talking about the difficulties of coaching a team that has already been eliminated and keeping them up.
Yeah, I've just learned that, these guys are very resilient. They're mentally resilient. It really doesn't matter what's happening on or off the field. As soon as they cross the white lines, they're going to give it everything they have. And I think that's reflective of what we've done, so far, especially defensively. These guys work hard no matter what the record is, no matter where we end up on the field. And I appreciate that attitude, that mentality. And coach used to always talk about, you get to the playoffs, it's a crash landing. There's no smooth landing. One thing I would say now, we have an end date. And hopefully these guys, they understand that and, want to go out with a bang. So.
Yeah, it's a crash landing, but they've been smashing through the trees for going on 6 weeks. What's difficult for you about covering a team that is out of the playoff race?
Great question. I like this better than the phony, they have a chance at the playoffs, whether it's 2020, 2022, where you're like, oh, if they do this and 19 different, then if you do the New York Times playoff odds predictor, at least we're not doing that. I think this one is much more laid bare, the situation they're in. So there is that. But the lack of everyone caring. Tom, we used to cover the most interesting professional sports team in the world, and we did it for a long time. So we're still not used to it. It's still tough, but poor us is what I'm trying to get to. Poor me and you.
Yeah, and it's funny, too, because there were so many games where they'd win 27-12 over the Panthers or something, and the game was a snoozer because you knew how it was going to end. And it was difficult to extract a story from that because you expected a win, and then you get into style points. And what does it mean for the AFC Championship or the playoff race? How well are they playing? Are they trending in the right direction? Now there's very little football talk, very little things to look forward to and converse about. And that's what sucks is we're not talking about the football as much, nor the arc of what guys might be doing who will be big difference makers down the road. We're spent, 5 minutes so far today in this show talking about Bailey Zappe and whether or not he is a competing number 2 or a locked-in number 2. So to me, it's fascinating. All right, this was a fun exercise. Let's leave it for a second. This was my top 20 Patriots. I was curious to do this just to look at the general vibe and where the drop-off is and everything else. Christian Barmore, Matt Judon, Gonzalez, Peppers, and Stevenson are my top 5. Trent Brown, talent-wise, as good as it gets. Onwenu, Elliott, Tavai, Hunter Henry. Then we get into some other guys. Duggar, Bourne, Keon White, David Andrews, Bentley, Strange, Jonathan Jones, Anthony Jennings, Demario Douglas. Your results may well vary. Michael, you had all those up there.
Yes.
Your take on that group?
I mean, yeah, it's a 4-11 team. There's a lot of guys you respect. There's a lot of guys who have had good years. There's guys that have had breakout years. There's guys that have been reliable.
Can we throw it back up while we're talking?
Yeah, bring it back up.
That way the people can look and see it.
I'm just saying there's not a lot of maybe Pro Bowl, All-Pro type players on that list.
Yeah, and when you see the break, look at all the guys who have expiring contracts, okay? Brown, Onwenu, Elliott, Henry, Duggar, Bourne, all of those guys have expiring contracts. And then when you have Anthony Jennings at 18, good player. Probably could challenge to be a starter elsewhere. We'll also look at how many defensive players there are there and how many skill position players there are there. I'd have Demario Douglas at 19. I'm sure he's a riser. But it is really interesting to look at where the strengths of this team are and where they're light. Here's a few comments on from people out there. Brian, always a good buddy. He had Barmore, Peppers, Onwenu, Gonzalez, and Bentley. And then he had a few other fellas down there. Thank you. We only need a 5. TJ, Peppers, Tavai on the outside. The punter, it's Bryce Behringer.
He has a name, sir.
Google it, TJ. Next.
He kicked it 80 yards the other night.
He did,
awesome.
The air. Paul Nargang. Peppers, Elliott. Okay, he had a 2. Douglas Barmore and Anthony Jennings. And then Kyle Davey. Barmore, Peppers, Tavai, Andrews, and John Jones. So there's a variety, and I actually have right here, which I'll get into after your list.
Wow.
I tallied up 30 of the votes and just came up with a consensus. What do you got? Who'd you put where?
I was defensive heavy with mine, and a big question coming into the year was Devin McCourty. So I have 2 safeties in the spots there. Christian Barmore, we're affected by the most recent game with 3-sack quarter. And then David Andrews made my list because he's been on the field for 100% of the offensive plays. And I have a tie. Pop Douglas, he's their chain mover. But they don't move the chains much, so Bryce
Where's
Behringer.
your Judon and where's your Gonzalez?
Well, they got hurt in week 3
they're
and
part
4.
of the team. They're on the roster.
Maybe I didn't understand the assignment. I think Gonzalez certainly would have made it given what we think would have panned out. And Judon obviously is the only Pro Bowler that we know of on the team, so they would have made it. But I'm looking at the team over 15 games. That's my list.
These people understood it. These people got the grip. Barmore, I took 30 votes. Okay, I went with 30 because there were 115 responses. Barmore had 30 overall votes in the top 5, 19 number ones, 6 number twos. Judon, he had 10 number ones, 9 number twos. He had 28 votes. Next up was Gonzo, 27 votes for him, Michael. He had 1-1, 6 twos, and 11 threes. Jabril Peppers and Mike Onwenu were next up. They had 17 of the 30 votes, put them in the top 5. So your 5 best players, according to you folks, Barmore, Judon, Gonzo, Peppers, and Onwenu.
Good.
There was a vote for Trent. There was a vote for
a lot
John
of math.
Jones.
When's election night? They should have you on.